Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I am joined today by the wonderful Jasmine Healy-Pagan. Jasmine, how are you?
Hi, Chrissy. I am great. It's so good to finally be here, Zoom chatting with you.
I know Zoom chatting, but funnily enough, we're in the same city. But it's cool that we can Zoom across the other side of town, isn't it?
Sure is awesome.
So you and I met just over a year ago, I think it was, and I was inspired by your story of you coming back to Townsville from America with two young girls, similar to myself, and founding a wellness community in Townsville. And I wanted to share that story a bit today with my, I struggle to say followers because that's not the right word, but with my community and my wellness schools. So really, I wanted to chat with you today about the importance of building a community to support our health and well-being and to get some insights from you on that because I would see you as one of the pioneers in our community in that regard. How do you feel about that?
A little bit, probably one of the crazier ones in our community. But pioneers, call it what you like.
Yeah, pioneer. I think we all have to be pioneers from time to time, don't we? So it is interesting that our journeys have been slightly different at different paces, but we have kind of come back to Townsville to raise our families, and we really wanted to share a message of health and wellness. So for me, you obviously saw a need to establish the Sundalah community more than a decade ago in Townsville. And I want to understand what was your inspiration behind that, because what did you feel was lacking personally for you?
Um, well, if I think back to when I was ready for the next phase. I knew it was coming for a couple of years, but finally, when we did the whole big move, the transition of moving from the US back to Australia, and back then it was, online stuff wasn't quite as simplistic as it is now. No social media back then, it was a different world, slightly. I think I'd been coming back every year or so, visiting my parents here, and I was starting to get the sense of what I wanted to do. I've always been a creator of new things, so I knew that when we were living in Cape Cod, it was going to be not a short term. We were there for 7 years, but I knew the business that we built over there was not long term, and I knew that I wanted my kids to grow up for a portion of their lives in Australia. So when we kept coming back, Townsville had changed, or it was changing a lot. It was becoming a lot more diverse and open-minded. And I was sort of like, oh yeah, I think I could live back there. And I really think I'd love my kids to grow up there, and other reasons for coming back to Australia. But so when we got back in 2006, I was very happy just to be a mum for a while, just take a break, just land and settle. I'd been so busy doing so many things in the States. So I just wanted to feel it out. And I was also a student of yoga and a fairly new yoga teacher back then. And so when I came back, one of the things that I discovered was there's a real misconception of what yoga was. I often got people saying to me that yoga was a religion, or it was for flexible people, and that was not just once or twice. This was constant. So I was just listening and learning to these misconceptions. Didn't have the online world back then, so messages pass on and people believe what they hear, which is fine, no judgment there. But I just thought, wow, there's a lot of people missing out, and there's a real misunderstanding there. So that was the beginning of sort of that knowing of, okay, here is something that I can help shift. And so being a fairly new yoga teacher, someone that wanted to be a part of that process of expanding that awareness, but also connecting with people that loved that learning dimension through yoga. The first thing I did was, reach out to other yoga teachers, because there was a very small number of yoga teachers here, maybe a dozen yoga teachers at most. So I reached out to them. Let's get together and let's share what we love first, and then let's help other people learn why and how they can discover the style and teacher of yoga that best serves them, and just understand the vastness, the big picture of what yoga is. And it has nothing to do with touching your toes. Well, I suppose it does, you can you do get more flexible in the process, but there's so much more to it than that. So that was the initial catalyst for, okay, let's get together. We understand the big picture. Let's help other people understand the big picture and help them feel good in the process.
Yes, that's really important. And so the yoga side of things obviously then grew and grew and grew and grew. Did that happen organically or generally in terms of you building your community and where you've got to more recently with the wellness directory?
Well, I think, when we understand that system in itself, yoga, encompasses all facets of wellness. So physical, mental, emotional, social, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So being a student of yoga, we understand that because that's what we love to study, and it helps us live a very fulfilled life. Mm-hmm. And when life is confusing, or we can go back to those teachings and we can understand, perhaps start to pull and draw on what we need to find clarity again. Mm-hmm. So just having that in my life, I just love that it helps me get on and do what I need to do, whether it be a mother, a business owner, or whatever. It just supports me personally. Mm-hmm. And so initially, that was obviously the core. So initially, it was the yoga teachers that came together to help people be well, essentially. So feeling good, even if you don't mention the word yoga, but even though that system is sort of underpinning it, or an opportunity for people to experience it, because a lot of people didn't understand it. So that's why I created the first event called Sundalah Sunday. So I said, okay, let's give people the opportunity to experience this, to try this, to understand this big smorgasbord of wellness options, which yoga is. And that in itself, for a lot of people back then, was like, huh? I thought yoga was this. So that was the beginning of, the first thing I started was Sundalah Sundays, which was an annual event. Well, actually, started in 2008, and then I ran 2 for 3 years. So 2 in 2009, 2010, 2011. 2012, we needed to change venue. And so then we moved over to another venue, and then I ran 1 a year right up until 2018. So that, of course, then built, and every year, all run by volunteers, and all funds raised went to not-for-profit. So it was and it's of course got bigger and bigger and bigger, up till we had about 60 volunteers running the day. And then, of course, anyone that was anything to do with wellness in the community came on board, and then we had markets and talks, and there's a thread of all of those things in yoga. There's a web there. And so that's really how the first sort of gathering sort of happened, that whole of bringing people together and learning ways to feel good, and learning who in our community has, something to offer. So let's connect and learn more about one another. And perhaps this person over here is aligned with what you're needing. Let's, encourage people to step out and try something different.
That's really important. And I think you talk a little bit about the barrier to entry for yoga, because people have a misconception about what it is, or they try it once or twice and they decide it's not for them. But so many times I hear people say, oh, I'm going to join yoga in the future, and my advice is there's no time to start in the present, and you can just start with 5 minutes. You don't need to start with a 90-minute, session and be standing on your head by the end of it.
It's interesting that you say that. That exact phrase that's a great reminder. Like, I tried yoga once and I didn't like it. And that happens a lot, right? So in the beginning of Sundalah, I often would say to people, well, if you go to a hairdresser and you don't like that hairdresser, do not go back to a hairdresser, so encouraging people to just, and that was the whole premise of Sundalah Sundays. Well, maybe what you tried wasn't quite for you, but guess what? There are other flavors of ice cream. Maybe you're not into chocolate, maybe there's, and people didn't know that existed. So that was the premise of sharing. Okay, but yoga isn't just that. Yoga is all of this too. Come on over and check it out.
That's really interesting. Can I tell you quickly my funny yoga story? So I went to university in Lismore, and obviously Byron Bay is nearby, and that's a big hub for, yoga and retreats and this type of thing. And one summer I spent 3 months in Byron working in a coffee shop. And I was living with my friend, and there was a community center down the road, and she said, "Oh, let's go and do these morning yoga classes, and it's for beginners." And I've always been very inflexible, and even though I was very sporty, the whole stretching and flexibility thing wasn't ingrained in me from a young age. So I was fast at running but inflexible. So it's quite funny because I went along to these what I thought was beginner yoga classes, and it was 90 minutes in the morning for 6 weeks. And when we got to the end of the 6 week program, I was reading the flyer on the wall, and it said medium to advanced yoga. But by the end of the 6 weeks, I could touch my toes, I could stand on my head, I could do all this bendy stuff I'd never been able to do before. So I was kind of duped into thinking I was doing beginner yoga.
Obviously what you were meant to jump into, and you didn't know, just like blind. It's so funny that you had that experience, because mine was very similar. You know, I lived in New York City, and I was my background is teaching, but is fitness. I worked for a big chain of health clubs called New York Sports Clubs in Manhattan. And so I was living and working there, and I was offered yoga many times, like so many times. And I look, you know, and I look back, I was that person too. I was like, yoga, I'm going to go for a run around Central Park, I know this yoga, what's this oogie boogie stuff? And back then it was underground in the 90s, like it just kept on being offered to me. And then as you become, a corporate, whatever, director, whatever you are, and it's so busy on that treadmill, especially that New York City treadmill, as you know, you've lived in London, right?
Yeah.
London. Yeah. So, living and working that fast-paced life, and then I was like, oh gosh, I need something. Going for a run, I feel like I've been hit by a bus. I need something else. And that was just because I was exhausted. And so I could try a few yoga classes in the chain of health clubs I worked for, but I was still at work. And I was like, no, I'm taking I quite like that stuff. It makes me feel better. I might take myself down to an actual yoga studio, which was what I did one morning. And I tell this story often, but that was the changing of my understanding, that I came out of there feeling I was so physically challenged. Like, I didn't know that that's what yoga could be. I was sweating. I couldn't do half of what they were asking me to do. And I thought I was pretty fit. I was 23 or whatever it was. I thought I was pretty fit. But I came out of there with this elixir running through my veins. I was light and I was ready to go back to work. And I just was like, I want more of that. And so coming from the same mindset. And so I think that's what, coming into yoga, coming back to Townsville, being, within that community that didn't understand it, and that were very much like, that oogie boogie, it's a lot of people. There was like, back then I used to wear headbands. I used to keep my hair out of my face. And I had a friend that made me all these great headbands, I used to sell stuff and back then. And it was interesting because I wore the headbands, I was this oogie boogie yogi. And it was interesting how when I started taking those off, I was like back to sort of my health and fitness kind of person. It was a fascinating journey back then to watch people's, I was very much coming from a lot of their mindset, because I remember that. And I'm like, yeah, I get where you're at. I was there too. Yet steering that back then was interesting. Once the internet exploded, it gets a lot easier. People can find out their own way. But anyway.
Oh, it's funny because my Byron yoga experience was in 1995, so probably much the same time as you're experiencing it in New York. So, and what's also quite funny about that is when you reflect on that I used to travel back from London to Townsville and see big signs, Bikram yoga. And I thought, who'd want to do Bikram yoga in Townsville where it's already 35 degrees most of the time? It used to make me laugh, but now I do. I used to love going to hot yoga in London in wintertime, that's for sure.
Me too. It's what you want, right? Especially in Northeast, same for me. I was like, I used to go to a solarium back then occasionally just to go and heat up. I was just like, please just I want to be warm. Yeah, I get it.
Oh my God, I feel like you're my soul sister from another mister, because I was doing the same thing in London. I never went to sunbed. I'm like, I have SADS. I need a sunbed.
Well, I just went there to put stuff on my face, because I didn't really want it on my face. So I used to go in there just to get warm. Yeah, no one knew I had a tan. It's all under my clothes. Yeah. I didn't have it on my face. Just to get warm.
Now that we've been back for 2 years and I have my natural skin tone back, my daughter says to me, Mummy, how come you're black and I'm white? And I'll say, well, you have London skin, I have Australian skin, because she's very fair and I have olive skin. So it's quite interesting. I wanted to ask you really, so have you changed, or has your vision for Sundalah changed over time, or has it changed together?
I think evolved with it, and I've always been quite intuitive. Well, I think since I left Australia, I went with a one-way ticket, and I and back then, there was no social media or anything, and I didn't know anyone doing what I was doing. So, I just left the country. I knew I wasn't coming back for a while, and then I was offered all these things, and I had to take a lot of risks, and I had to really dig deep. And I know now that back then I didn't know that I was really building my intuitive muscles. We all have them. It's just that we have to build them. I think if we can start building them from a young age, things then it gets easier. So I think the risks that I took in my 20s and then started studying that in a form. Before I studied yoga, I studied Tibetan Buddhism, and I had some great teachers in New York, and I was single in New York. So I just was doing everything's at your fingertips there when you live in Manhattan. And so, there was this wonderful opportunity to really learn about myself. And then yoga came into it, and I was like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. This system is just so vast. This is complementing all this other stuff. And I was just building that intuitive depth and those layers that we have within us, and yoga and systems like yoga and teachings like ancient teachings, that's what they do. So by the time I came back here, that was fairly solid. So starting Sundalah and working with the events, it didn't happen here. I like running events. I've always run events. There's always a thread. You look back at what you used to do when you were younger. There's always things, that's always still there. So I enjoy doing that. And running the events for so many years, I loved it. And of course, they got bigger and bigger. And then all of the funds, I started Yoga Tools for Schools, which is the first not-for-profit of its kind in Australia. And so starting that and juggling many roles in that organisation for many years, intuitively that felt right. So just letting that sort of ride that wave. And then feeling to the point, I think it was in 2017, after that event, I was getting tired, after juggling. I also am a yoga teacher. I ran a kids yoga club after school for 10 years. I've got 2 kids, a husband, or whatever. And when your kids become teenagers, that whole world changes. They need you in a different way. So, and they're all involved from the beginning. So I love that my family understands how to create something, like from a seed. And I love that, well, especially my kids. But I was getting tired, and I could feel that I was like, okay, there needs to be another evolution. I talk about that on my website, with the Sundalah story. And so I made a plan. I said, okay, 2018, 10 years, I'm going to start to change this, because I ran other events as well, Global Mala, some big other, you can read about on the Strand. Like, I need to change this. And now that I've been doing this for so long, other people can see how it's done, and maybe someone else will step in. Maybe I've done lots of different events. People have been involved for years and years. So, I'm very happy to pass the baton on. I have no problem. I'm very much someone that steps into spaces that I can learn, there's need, and I'm happy to give it a go. And then I'm like, well, if someone else is covering that, great, I'll go over here. You know what I mean? Together, let's all cover different bases. And so I was like, okay, I think it's time I'm not really running events right now, but someone else could. So that's when I gave people the heads up. I don't think people believe me, but that's, okay, I'm going to get 2018, 10 years. We had a big year, big Sundalah Sunday, this big 70s party under the stars, 70s live music. You can see all that on Facebook. It was an amazing big birthday party. And I was like, right, I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to transition. And of course, then we had the floods, so we couldn't run events then. It was, and then we had COVID. And so understand the timing was, serendipitous perhaps. But so, I think it all comes back to that intuitive pulse. I'm a big believer you don't do things because you're good at it. You know, when I lived in New York City, I built all of these aquatic programs in a big chain of health clubs, and I brought in a lot of income for this company. But you know, built up, and I was offered all these amazing things, you know, to stay in New York and do this and that. And this company was just going off, and I was like, I'm not meant to stay. I've done what I need to do in New York. You know, I stood in Central Park and said, I want to live single in the city with my own apartment. Getting your own apartment in New York is harder than getting a job. People that live in big cities know how hard it is, especially on the Upper East Side where I used to live. Like, that's my goal. I want to live single in the city without being dependent. I live by myself, you know, and have my own apartment in a nice neighborhood and be able to do me in New York. Once I achieved that, and then, you know, and that was all about the money, it's just not who I am. So then we moved, obviously, and off we went. And then the same thing happened in Cape Cod when we built up this amazing business. People said to me in New York, you can't leave with all this. And I was like, oh, I gotta. And then, you know, that was it's a whole story there. But yeah, just cutting that cord and then starting again, moving to a town when you know one, and starting again from scratch, but close to New York for Angel's family, my husband. And then we were there, and then we built up this very successful business. And people said again, you can't leave this. You can't. Running aquatic programs, as successful as this is, and I love working with families and kids, and you know, I love it, but it's not what I'm meant to do. And I think, you know, and I was meant to come back. And then again, same thing with Sundalah, being patient, understanding that timing is everything. Sometimes we need to pause and feel. I see a lot of people rush in when they haven't really, not everyone, but, you know, sometimes we do have to sleep. Don't get me wrong, that's important, you know, just get going. But there are other times we need to just pause. And so after 10 years of running events, you know, Sundalah was really rolling, you know, things were really, I mean, I just established, I suppose, that consistency. People just knew who I was. It wasn't like I was doing anything fancy. It was just, I was there every year. I don't know anyone that's done events every single year for over a decade. I just don't know. I mean, people, as I said, are probably just crazy. It's just like, you know, like I would, if someone else wants to do it, I said, I'll buy a ticket. I will come. You know what I mean? Like, I'm there. So for me, I just had to pause again and take a break and tune into what was next. And here I am, you know, again, and I needed a break. You know, we get tired. We get tired, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things for people is to just stop and just take a moment, you know. It's okay.
That reflection process is really important. And, you know, I've noticed over the time that I've got to know you shine through as a very soulful person, and you talk about intuitive muscle, but do you think that soulfulness was always intrinsically within you, or you've developed it and grown it over time?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think I'm a Sagittarian. Okay, so, you know, fairly classic Sagittarian. So all my amazing astrologist peeps tell me, friends, that, you know, so I love adventure. I love risk. You know, I'm outgoing. You know, I've always been that person. I don't know. You know, like I look back, you know, to my New York City days, and I was definitely a fire sign there. You know, I was definitely this driver, like the classic person that just feeds off that energy because that's who I was. But I think that can also not be a good thing. You know, like you do what you know, and there's a security blanket there, and then life, and that's I think where the spiritual practice of yoga comes in. You know, life will offer you what you need, and are you ready to leap into a dimension that's unlike what you're used to doing, and just explore it, you know? Like I think, and that's what happened with yoga for me. You never could have told me back then that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. But you know, but then that's the way. What the beautiful thing is the way the world is moving and shifting now. I mean, look, especially in the last couple of years, everything that we were doing here in Townsville in 2008 that was a little out there, and we were sort of like, oh, you know, that's that Oogie Boogie tribe.
Yes.
Is not anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, we're all just following our hearts and perhaps exploring something is not like what we usually do, you know? So yeah, I think it all comes back to this.
Yeah.
And we're all soulful. It's whether or not we're listening to that soul calling, or and it's okay. It's like sometimes we're not ready. I mean, I wasn't ready for a while. I was like, oh no. And then you just put your foot in or your toe in, whatever that might be. I mean, yoga was obviously that for me, but as we go along and different things happen in our life, and depending on how we've been raised, what programs and conditioning we've been, we've worked through when we've been young, or if we've had trauma, or all sorts of things, So yeah, I think, we're all soulful. And I think at different times in our lives, we start to reconsider and maybe reflect, as you say, and explore something different, which is scary.
Yeah, it's really powerful, important. And I think that, over the last few years, people probably have had to pause more than they wanted to in some instances. And that's a good thing, because, I personally hope that, seeing life on the hamster wheel and the treadmill and negating our soulful, the joy from our soul is kind of preventing us from, self-actualization, which is, becoming the most that one can be. And I talk about that quite a bit in some of the work that I'm doing now. But I was wondering as well for you, because obviously you're a well-known figure now, and we're not just talking about in the woo-woo space, but obviously you're a visionary and you're a role model for, for a lot of people. So do you feel intrinsic pressure to remain helpful and positive and inspiring to your community?
It's funny, because it's funny how when you say that, when people say, oh, I don't really like, it's interesting when you say that, because I don't, is that true? Maybe it is from some people's perspectives, but maybe it's not. Like, I don't really see myself as that. I just see myself as someone that just gets on with it. I just get on with it. There's things I know I've got to do while I'm here, and I know the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
You don't know when our time's up. So, and I know that there are things I enjoy, and there's obviously I need to take a break. Earlier this year, I've had everything I'd planned, I'd had to stop in my tracks because I had to support family. So I don't know, like I think, again, it comes back to that intuitive knowing, like I feel sometimes I want to be involved more in different things because I just love learning, and I love what you're doing, or I'd love to be involved. But then, you can't, you have to go, look, wow, I'm in my final year of my 40s, like, not that should matter, it's just a number, but I think each decade too, physiologically, we're changing, like, and I look at my 20s, I look at my 30s, and now I can look at my 40s, and we have to get really honest, and you just got to come back to this, like, you want to be involved in everything, and I think there's this immense pressure and this tug from within ourselves, and perhaps then people feel it from externally to be everywhere. And that's, I think, where this chronic fatigue is coming from. We need to disconnect from social media. We need to make sure that we monitor that, because we're just being pulled away from this, and then that then takes us away from that intuitive knowing of what do I need to do today, because we're constantly outside of ourselves, and we're not taking some time every day to say, okay, where am I at right now? And that only comes when our nervous system comes down to its base. Boom, we know what that feels like when we feel grounded and anchored, or we go for a walk by ourselves and just listen to the breeze and the trees and the birds, and we just do a solo something. No external coming at us. And I think our world today, I think this is the hardest thing for our world today and our young people now, is to actually be able to manage that. For you and I, we understand what that feels like before technology. You and I know what that was like. We grew up coming home from school, lying under a tree, looking up and just taking a break. Our young people today, they don't know what that is like.
No, I know. I talk about with my best friend about this. We grew up riding our bicycles everywhere. And if we wanted to go to do anything after school, we had to ride our bikes. Whereas nowadays it's too dangerous for kids to ride our bikes, but we give them a mobile phone instead. And so we've almost taken away something that could potentially be healthy, but has some risks with another piece of equipment that has far more risks associated and is not particularly healthy. So, you know, I do struggle a bit about that myself, and thinking about, you know, what to do with my kids, because, you know, by the time they're old enough for devices, it will have evolved even further. And my daughter comes home from school now and she's 6 and says, "Mum, can we do TikTok?" And I say, "No, darling, we're not going to do TikTok." I don't even know what it is and we're not doing it.
Let's go for a walk.
Let's count butterflies in the garden.
Yeah, I really feel like, you know, having worked in schools for, you know, for so long, and wellbeing, and just watched the changes that have happened, you know, from obviously my youngest has just finished year 12. And like, I look back at where they were and how things have changed, the school system and just young people in general in society, like, whoa, you know, and I can't even imagine what's ahead. But, you know, I'm hopeful that things, because of what we're learning, that things are shifting back.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope there's a good balance, because there's you know, yes, there's risks involved in every activity that we choose, but, you know, I think that sometimes that 24-hour connectedness is a bigger risk than going for a ride on a bicycle. And you talked about the yoga tools for school and the youth reset programs, and you've got another program that you're working on to hope to launch later this year called Wisdoms Within. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this was something that I've been offering for about maybe 8-10 years. I offered meditation circles, a bi-monthly group that when we moved into Sundalah House, which is we renovated a Queenslander in Belgian Gardens, and underneath was all Sundalah space. Back then, there wasn't really people coming together and learning from one another. So I used to run a few things in my sort of Sundalah hub sort of thing downstairs, and I have a private studio. I used to run like meditation circles twice a month, and people would come, we'd do a guided meditation, and then we'd have morning tea and that kind of thing. So that ran for many years. And I also ran a Saturday afternoon monthly gathering called Sunset Connects, where we'd have a speaker, someone would chat, we'd have afternoon tea. And so I did all these things in the early days. And so, you know, many years later, I was like, again, intuitively feeling, okay, I've been doing this for a long time now. You know, this needs to evolve in a different way, and how can I put this together into something that can serve people that's not already out there. Again, it comes back to that. So if someone else has it covered, I can say, hey, go here or go there. You know, this is what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. But also was offering opportunity for me to keep on coming back to the teachings and the learnings that I love, mm-hmm. by putting stuff together, mm-hmm. because that just fills my heart. And so that's, again, a self-care, mm-hmm. you know, time, self-care time, an opportunity for me to go, oh my God, yes, I got to revisit this, because, you know, I'm not running events, or I'm not doing this. Mm-hmm. So in 2019, I offered an opportunity for anybody that, you know, obviously was coming to the meditation circles. Hey, I'm going to do this, but it's going to be, I don't know where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. Again, it's that sometimes you just got to leap and just jump in. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where this is going to go, but once a month I'm going to run this thing, and then I'm going to take notes, and we do a workshop and meditation, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that ran from like 2019 and 2020, I did that. And so that was the compilation of this program I've been developing called Wisdoms Within. Mm-hmm. I'd hoped to have that sort of out earlier this year, but obviously the universe was like, no, take a step back. You've got other things to do. Mm-hmm. So now that Youth Reset is, you know, on the website, and that community offering and those things are rolling, which I've been working on also for a few years, I just said patiently, okay, second half of this year I'll pop, you know, it's on the website, is coming soon. Mm-hmm. And I just think this is an opportunity for people to also study the many layers of yoga without, say, committing to a yoga teacher training. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, I mean, yoga teacher trainings, you know, I started studying yoga not to be a yoga teacher. I studied it to learn more about yoga because it made me a better person, mother, you know, made me a better human, and it supported my life. Mm-hmm. So I thought, you know, let me offer something that gives the layers of yoga and self-support in a form that has lots of different options. And so it's, you know, again, I think I had to put it down again because it's meant to have another something and I don't know what that is yet, and I won't know what that is until later. I do believe that. I'm like, okay, I get you. All right, okay, no rush. I'll just put it down again.
Yes.
So yeah, that's okay.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing the end result of it, because it sounds awesome, because I do think that there are a lot of people who would be interested in the principles and the foundations of it without needing to become a yoga teacher. And then that's what you say about sharing stuff that you find valuable because it fills up your heart. It's also what I'm trying to do with my work. I'm sharing the stuff that I find most valuable. I love signposting people to other people's work like yourself, because it shows that, you know, it's not just all about me and what I have. It's about, look at all of the great information out there, and different information resonates with people at different times. And sometimes you'll pick up a book and it'll make no sense to you, and 6 months later you'll pick up the same book and it'll make perfect sense to you. So it's like you say, it's kind of timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, that's the reason why I have the Sundalah Wellness Directory. That's, you know, why I do that. I mean, it's bringing all those wellness people together. You know, like, it's okay, if you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard to find it.
Yes.
So maybe, you know, it's hard to Google something if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yes.
That's sort of my premise with our wellness directory, is like, okay, jump on here. You know, there's over 100, you know, listings in there or whatever there is. Just maybe there's something there that when you see it, you go, oh, I want to know more. You know. So.
Well, you know, I travel on do my mini road shows around, and I've spoken to people in other towns who are hoping to replicate your wellness directory in other towns. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Oh my God, that's so cool.
So you're a pioneer, and you're
inspiring. I don't know any of this. I'm just in my little bubble. See, I need to get out more, but then again, I have to, you know, see, there's the pressure happening. I need to get out.
Maybe you and I could take a road trip together.
Sure. Yeah. Now that I've got adults, I don't have children anymore. Supposedly, I'll have more time.
You have more time. So I would like to ask you, what would you say to someone that feels disconnected from themselves, from their soul and their spirit?
I think, you know, tuning into the things that you're doing, obviously. I mean, what you're doing is exactly supportive of that. I mean, you know, your book and all your work, Chrissy, is obviously encapsulating that, people finding ways to bring their energy into that fullness, first of all, like feeling centered, and then having tools to gravitate to. Okay, well, I know how that feels, and I remember when I put down events, I didn't know. I know people are like, what are you going to do now, Jasmine? What are you going to do now? I said, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I know I've built this platform, but I'm not sure where it has to go yet. So I just had to stop and wait for some inspiration to arrive. And then sometimes there were times where I was like, oh, you know, even just, I remember thinking, gosh, what now? Like, you know, is this it? Like, what, you know, where do I go now? And I think it's really valuable to have, you know, a little portal like what you've created, like a little portal of support for people to just explore. You know, no decisions have to be made here. Just explore this, just for curiosity, you know, and see what feels, you know, try it. And how does it feel for you, you know? So yeah, sorry, was that the question?
No, that's my favorite word, curiosity, and I talk so much about that. Like, if there's one word I would love everybody in the world to adopt, it's to be curious about their health, curious about their well-being, curious about their life, curious about their life experiences, curious about their feelings, their thoughts, their behaviors. Because if you adopt curiosity, then you're open to exploring, you're open to answers, you're open to intuition, you'll open yourself up to so many things. Would you agree with that?
And yeah, absolutely. And being curious about the challenges, you know, as we know, you know, those that obviously, you know, are students of or really study that, the premise of growth mindset, and, you know, understanding that everything is there for our growth. And when times are really tough, the really tough times, which may not have come our way yet, you know, like, and I that's one of the things I learned in my 20s through through yoga is knowing that, you know, like the peaks and valleys in life. Okay, sometimes things are all rosy and cruisy. Yeah, that's all. That's the reprieve. But
Yes.
no, there's going to be some tough, dark, heavy valleys, emotional exhaustion. If you're lucky, perhaps on a level that takes you to a place you have never been, if you're lucky, and you've got the support around you to guide you through it, that is going to take you to a place in your life that brings you the potency that you want. You know, that's where the real gifts are. You know, like when, you know, look at your book, you know, like how when we go into those places of real challenge, be curious enough to perhaps even sit with it. Have support, definitely reach out for help, and we definitely need to have the courage, to build the courage for that. But there are times where we need to just be curious to know that this, of course, will pass. Again, we attain the support that we need, and then, wow, there's gonna be some amazing things ahead, because of the depth of growth and what we understand, and I think also the compassion and the empathy and the understanding we have, not just within ourselves, but with others. And I think that's what's really needed in this world. You know, and that comes back to, again, the teachings of yoga. You know, we've all heard the word namaste. So namaste means the light in you is connected to the light in me. When you're in that place of truth and honesty, and I'm in that place of truth and honesty, we're connected, we're one. We are one. And of course, if you're into quantum physics or, you know, any of that unity consciousness, which is becoming more and more mainstream now, we understand that when we can connect with one another and know that we are just brothers and sisters, you know, as the teaching says, walking each other home, we can not only support one another, but we can also understand that we're not different, you know, we're all the same, and together we can make a difference in this world if we come from that compassion, connection mindset, you know. And I think when we go through tough things, it gives us more of a deeper understanding when other people are going through it.
It's true. I've become very familiar with the term post-traumatic growth. Have you experienced that term for yourself?
You know, and in different levels and different layers for different reasons. And, you know, I remember when I was going through some tough stuff with some young people and just, you know, supporting people and not really understanding where they were at. But because of the journeys that I've had and what I've seen and witnessed, wow, I'm so grateful of the emotional distress that and worry, I think, that I've been through, because it's taken me somewhere I didn't understand before.
And it is true what you say, because some people may not necessarily have been touched by trauma yet, but it's not to say that, you know, things don't change, and, you know, life can change quite dramatically in an instant. And there's a classic song that I love, which says, you know, the real stuff to worry about is the stuff that blindsides you at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, because we spend so much time worrying about silly, superfluous things. It's the huge stuff that's going to come and smack us out of the blue that we have no idea of, that we then need to be able to recover from and cope from and make sense of. And it's really important. So I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing, because you have helped a lot of people. You're inspiring a lot of people. And I think as well, I know that you're just sharing a message of love and kindness, to be authentically you, and there's no agenda, and your intention is pure. And I think people can resonate with that, and they can see that so easily. So
that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So you got to keep teaching me these things, because and also, you know, ring me up. Okay, Jasmine, time to step out of your bubble. you need to come check this out, because you obviously get around to a lot more places than I do, which is awesome. So yeah, I'm always open ears to that guidance. So thank you, Chrissy, so much for having me, and you know, timing, we got here. So I'm really grateful for your patience and and everything you're doing. It's wonderful to watch your energy and how you're supporting your incredible books and everything you're doing. I'm just so grateful for everything you're bringing. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm glad there was some pioneers in Townsville long before I moved back here.
Hey, we've all got our little torch. So we can all have our little thing, lead from our hearts, and then together we can just light this town up. Yay.
It's funny what you say, though, about you recognized it was your turn to lead, but then you were ready to pass the baton on, because I watched a really great interview between Reese Witherspoon and Ferrera America Ferrera, who's the Ugly Betty star. And she was saying for her Latin American community, she realized it was her turn to lead. And when you were talking about that, I think we all get a turn to lead, and it's up to us to step into that, wholeheartedly and decide, that's okay. I'm ready to take my turn.
And I think and we all have a beautiful thing to share. I mean, we all have something to share. We all have something very significant and important to give. And it may not be to stand up and speak like this. It can be on many platforms. The trick is to actually, first of all, know what that is and be honest and truthful with yourself. And that can take time to develop. And then having the courage to say, okay, it's time. It's time for me to do that. And knowing the why behind it. And I think that's really crucial, like understanding the why. And for me, it's, I enjoy learning that. It's a space I can step into that is not being covered yet, and it's needed. Okay, all right, you're sort of like, okay, anybody else? Okay, all right, here I go. And, that was the thing with Youth Reset. There is nothing, the program that I've been developing now for quite a few years and testing it, like for the last couple of years, pre and post data, having worked in schools for so long now. And in high schools, and my background is high school teaching, and I love youth. So there is nothing there. And with 12-month wait lists for kids to see someone to talk to, and especially up here in the north, like things I was learning, I was like, there's really nothing there like this for young people. And so that's why I took my time developing it, and knowing that I love working with youth. This is an area that I'm very passionate about always, and there's nothing there. So that is something I've been working on for a long time. If someone had stepped in halfway through that, because I do things quite slowly, not really. See, I'm long distance runner. I'm not. You said you were like, I can run fast. Well, I was a swimmer, competitive swimmer most of my life as a kid, but I was not very fast. I just chug it, just keep going. Anyway, so if someone stepped in and created something like that program a few years ago, I'd be like, great, it's covered, excellent. But so that's why
there's just 2 points that I can't end without asking you, actually, because and I mentioned to you that in step 9 of my book, it talks about creating positive social engagement in a healthy way. And that's kind of what you have essentially done with the Sundalah community, is to foster positive social engagement through a health and wellness platform. But, how important is it to you, believe, for people's well-being to have that positive social engagement on a consistent basis?
Yeah, well, it's essential, whether it's coming from home. If it's not coming from home, then if it's not coming from work, then somewhere else, definitely. I mean, we definitely need to lift each other up, and we definitely need to feel that energetically. We know what that feels like. We know when someone walks into a room, whether it's lifting our energy or not. It might just because something just happened to that person. There's no judgment there. It could be something really could have just happened. I think we need to gravitate to social engagement and support aligned again with what's going on here, because now there's so much out there. There's so many options, and of course online, it's just, I don't know about you, but there's so much online. It's just going to become even more saturated. It's hard to navigate your way. We have an online world, so we really need to be able to, again, tune into where we're at right now. what are we feeling that we need right now, in what alignment of themes, you know, what themes in my life right now am I gravitating towards? What am I interested in? And then starting to steer our way to a social network or a social, you know, with what you've got, Chrissy, is a book. It's a great way for someone to say, okay, I'm really interested in what she's doing. You know, I don't know much about it. I'm not sure if I'm quite ready. So there's a book. Okay, that's very, you know, non-intimidating. You know, I'll go read the book. Oh, if I resonate with the book, then, you know, that you offer all these other options. For me, you know, I've always tried to be very inclusive and affordable with everything with Sundalah. You know, I definitely don't want it to be about money. You know, the directory, the people what people pay to be in the directory goes back into building the machine, like the actual website. There's no payment there that comes back to me, and building the community, you know, so it's whatever it is, $49 a year. So that, but then that also feeds into some more community things that I'm planning. So we have a meet and mingle happening next month, which is free for anybody that's obviously on the directory, and a small amount, $10 for anyone else, just to come along and you know, help support some food and stuff. So it's about, first of all, you know, what can you afford? You know, and what aligns those two things? What aligns with you? You know, is this, you know, what you've read and what you understand? Is there the curiosity to go in and explore that, and then step away and go, was that for me? Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go again. Maybe I'll try again. You know, so I think that reflection is really important, because there's just an abundance of options out there now, and that's hard.
Yeah, that's true. There's almost, you're spoilt for choice, but it's navigating and taking time to explore. And in the book as well, I mentioned that if you can't find what you're looking for, create your own. And essentially that's what you did, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, that's pretty much what I've always done. And I think yeah, absolutely. I think it's, yeah, and if you see somebody else trying to do it, connect with them. You know, get together with them and look at ways you can do it together, you know, and build it together, you know, and learn, perhaps if you have, you know, as a part of that little sort of web, you know, you have, or an octopus or whatever, you have a few different areas that you can, you know, focus on together, and then you're actually just, then you're building, you know, more of what you and perhaps one or two other people want. I mean, I don't know, you know, it's again about being curious and being able to have those conversations with people. But it comes back to exactly what's needed, and if it's not there, am I willing to spend the time, you know, like my own time, to put into it to create this, and not need any particular outcomes from it, you know. Like, I mean, we all volunteer in certain aspects, right? You know, we might be on a club, kids sporting program or whatever. We all, you know, like whatever it is that we volunteer and put our energy into it, because we want to see something improve or get better, or want to contribute to something. You know, is that, am I doing this for money, or am I doing this because I really want to make a difference? And I truly believe if we step into a space where we would do it anyway, whether we were getting paid or not, you know, then do it.
Yeah.
Something might come about, you know, then you might end up being your work, you know, it might end up being your income. That doesn't really matter if it isn't. You know?
No, that's interesting, because you talk about inclusivity and the costs associated with stuff. And I think, you know, I love to make everything I do affordable for everyday people, because it's everyday people that often need the most support but don't have access to it, because they're not, you know, either they don't have the higher income to afford, you know, the support that they need, or they're not on necessarily a mental health care plan, so they're not tapping into it. So everything I do, I want to make it affordable to mainstream people, so there's no barrier to entry, and it's affordable for everyday working mums or everyday working dads. And you know, that's always my aspiration as well. So
thank you. Thank you for that.
and a few months ago, it's probably a year ago actually, you told me a brief story about your daughter saying to you, Mum, why do you do this? And obviously, you know, I've got two very young girls and they're involved in everything that I do. And they come and shout at me when I'm doing radio interviews, and they put their hand up my dress on my bum when I'm doing book readings in front of a room full of people. So they're very much a part of what I do. But it's hard to sometimes juggle the professional side of life with the parenting side of life. But how important has it been for you that your daughters have observed your journey and doing what's most important to you authentically, and what type of people they've become as a result of you know, your role modeling, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's a question you have to ask them. you know, they're 18 and 21 now, and they were, of course, around when, you know, at all of the events, they were there, and my family, my beautiful husband. I mean, they wouldn't have them without their support. You know, like they were a part of it. And I have to go. I mean, you go back through the Facebook photos. You know, I've got a lot of them in albums back to the early events, and looking at them back then. I actually have quite a few photos that I have to also put out as something, you know, them doing when I first started my kids yoga club, and they're of course in it. That's why I created a kids yoga club, because there wasn't one here. So I ran that for 10 years, and after school yoga club, and then I just kept on running it. Obviously, when they, you know, got over it, they were like, we don't need to come anymore, and teen yoga and all that. Yeah, I think the one of the reasons why I wanted to also move into a new business of sort of like holistic, this kind of business that I was doing when we came back to Australia, is I wanted them to be surrounded by that kind of mindset. And back then it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. So, you know, positive affirmations on the back of the toilet door, and, you know, so many different, all of the things that we love, and yoga, connection with positive friendships, and that. It's not to say that they haven't had their challenges, you know, like it's not going to be something that's going to screen them from all of the adversity that they've faced through their teenage years. And, you know, there has been a lot. So, but I know now, being where I'm at, that the seeds are there, and it's so, I have, you know, a very close relationship with both of them, and I'm so grateful for that. You know, like it's really beautiful. It's really, really special. Not that there hasn't been challenges, but, you know, those challenges, as I said, I wouldn't change a thing. You know what I mean? Like, thank you for those challenges, because I've taught so much. So, so yeah, I think. Sorry again, was that the question? See, I'm getting off track.
No, that's fine. It's like, you know, I think that it is worthwhile asking them, perhaps, you know, how they perceive your journey, because I do think that you know, my daughter's constantly telling me things, you know, I'm so proud of you, Mummy, for coming to volunteer at my swimming and my PE lesson. And I'm like, oh, thank you, Mummy. Thank you, Mummy. Thank you, Mummy. She keeps saying it. And it's kind of funny, because for me, it's like, well, I'm just helping out. Like, and I didn't necessarily understand that actually has a huge impact on her. And I'm sure what the girls have witnessed of you over the last decade has probably had an immensely positive impact on them, that, you know, it would be, you know, I'm just sure that they would be really proud of you.
Well, I'll ask them.
Yeah.
I know they'll give it to me straight. That's one thing that's great, you know, about our kids. I think, you know, I volunteered and taught yoga in all of their classes, and through primary school, you know, I was always offering all of, and, you know, of course, why wouldn't you, you know, be a part of their journey? And Apple, I suppose, you know, blessed to be self-employed, so, you know, I can, you know, have that flexibility with my schedule. Or yeah, absolutely, you know, I've always been offering, you know, ways to be involved in their schooling. And actually, even right up through high school, you know, I'm still teaching, you know, wellbeing and yoga classes at Pimlico, and, you know, they're gone now, and many other schools. So it's you know, when you come back to that question, when Jewel asked me in the car one day when I was offering, you know, I've been offering free teen yoga classes for a long time, and Youth Reset obviously as free community classes. You know, why do you do it, Mum? And it's just because I care. And I know how important, I care about youth, obviously. That's one of my threads, you know, in life. And I know how important it is, even more so now than ever, that
Mm-hmm.
our next generation are empowered. Like what they are facing and what they are dealing with today is just quite profound. And we need to help them. We need to support them, and we need to give them these strategies to self-regulate and be in, because once you can do that, and you can take care of yourself, and you can disconnect from that overwhelm that is constantly bombarding you like it never has in history before. When you understand that, you can soar, you can create anything in your life when you understand this, you know. And you and I know, and we've just been talking about for an hour, is all about that. So, you know, how to empower our young people from when they're little, you know, from primary school. It's not happening at school. And unfortunately, there's a lot of schools where it doesn't happen because curriculums are overcrowded, teachers are overwhelmed. Some days it might, but often most days it doesn't, you know, like a school is that kind of place. So how do we make sure that our young people have the space and time to tune into this from a young age? We can build this muscle from a young age, like, you know, you with the conversations that you have, and then with your girls, and then when they come into the bombardment of everything that's at them at school and then online or whatever, managing that, then they can come back to these things that have been taught to them, especially when they're younger. They grab it, you know, obviously they soak that up a lot easier when they're younger. But at the same time now, it's interesting as I say that, I also am seeing this, seeing a lot of young people, you know, young people have, of course, been exposed to so much more than we were, you know, of course, when we were their age, like teenagers. So there is this maturity in our teenagers, in our adolescents now, that was never there before. And what we know, of course, about brain, you know, neuroplasticity and everything happens in a teenage brain, what we understand is going on in the potency of their brain at this time, there is a real excitement there with the innovative opportunity and the creative opportunity that our young people have, given that they are sort of more advanced in some ways, but at the same time, the risk of them not being able to access that potential they have because of information overload, because they're online, you know, and their brain is not being built, and that sort of that neuroplasticity is not being directed as much as it could be at this time, which is, you know, can always be changed, but at that time is so crucial. I see a lot of hope out there. I see a lot of people doing amazing things, but I also see the other side. So, you know,
well, gone are the days when the 20-year-olds got on a plane and flew to England or America with, you know, no mobile phone, and their parents didn't hear from them for months at a time.
You know, like I look back and I go, that was so good for me. Like, you know, like landing in New York was $1 a minute to call home. So I didn't have those kinds of funds. I was in New York by myself, navigating everything, working it out myself. And I look back and there was like some big decisions I had to make. And even if I did have the quick messenger to message someone, actually I did have often throughout that time, a lot of people saying, you're crazy, why are you doing that? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm glad they weren't there, because I may not have done it.
No.
You know what I mean? So I'm glad that I had to go with this. And this is what I mean. So there could be a lot of young people out there that are just too scared, or they're just listening to everybody else, and they're not listening to this because social media, it's too easy to pick it up and go, what do you think?
I did see something last week that warmed my heart. I have to share it with you. I did a trade show at the university here in Townsville, and I happened to be next to the Red Cross blood donation tent. And the queues at that tent didn't stop for the entire day. Young people were queued 6 deep to sign up to donate blood, and it warmed my heart, made my blood warm. And I was looking at all these socially conscious teenagers who are about to embark on the university and feeling really you know, real hope and love for the people who care about others and who want to do something so important, you know. And every other stall around the trade show maybe had a couple of people at a time, and that was chock-a-block for 3 hours.
That's awesome. Yay. And they're you know, and that's why we need to just keep on supporting these amazing, creative, innovative minds, and keep cheering them on, you know, and get out to those that are not at uni. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of my goal with Youth Reset too, is to get into the pockets, you know, to get into the pockets of, because we all have this incredible light, this incredible meaning within each and every one of us, and we need to help, you know, people find that and support and explore that, you know. So yeah, we could just talk all day.
We can, and usually I do these interviews in 35 minutes. It's now an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to keep talking to you, but we have to stop.
Sorry, everybody, but you know, you can call us.
So I'm going to paste all your links, so you'll probably have a lot of people calling you at the end of this note. So thank you very, very much for joining me, and it's been great to chat with you. Namaste, and I hope to see you in person real soon.
Me too. Okay, we'll do that drive one day. Okay,
we'll do the drive. We'll do our road trip. Jasmine and Chris's show, like Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, I think we all have to put the dash cam up.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Chrissy.